welcome back. My name is Asta Marie and I'm the owner of Gema Garden. Today we are going to talk all about the Monstera, the Monstera family, and then later we are actually going to repot this giant Deliciosa, and we'll get into all that in a second. So just so you guys know what the structure of today is, first we are going to talk about Monstera, and then we're going to get into the details of how to care for it, what the lighting needs are, what are these things that I have sticking out of the soil. And then we're going to go outside and we're going to repot this one. The other three are good for right now, so we're not going to get into that. But this one we'll take outside and repot. And then after that, I'm going to take you over to the hydroponic system, which if you remember from 2 weeks ago, we very confusingly built the hydroponic system. We do have growth on 2 out of the 3 herbs that I planted. So first of all, I want to talk about the names of each of these. Many of you might recognize this one. It is the Monstera Deliciosa. It's kind of the most common Monstera. And when you think of a Monstera, that's the one that you're going to picture. Related to, or the same one, but a variegated version, is the Monstera Thai Constellation. It has an absolutely beautiful variegated pattern on it. It used to be 5 leaves. However, one of the leaves turned yellow and fell off, which is perfectly normal because it was the oldest leaf on the stem. And then the 4th one was broken off by my cats, which is a huge disappointment. So we just have 3 right now. But one is trying to come out right there. So maybe we'll have one by May. Speaking of May, I might not even have this in May. So I shared this on my Instagram stories. I haven't shared on here yet, but we will be moving to Virginia this August. And so next month, I'm actually flying back to Virginia for my sister's wedding. So I'll get started on some of the moving type things, fly back, pack up the house, and then we're moving back to Virginia. So I will be selling all of my plants. If you want more details on that or you're interested in claiming one, head over to my Instagram page. I'll be sharing more details here in the next week or so. This is not the same as the Monstera Albo. Monstera Albo is going to be a little bit thicker blocks of the white variegation, whereas this almost looks like a splattered constellation, hence the name. Next we have the Monstera Adansonii, covered in fenestrations. This plant, I've spent a lot of time chopping, propagating, and then adding back into the soil in order to get a very full looking plant. The second phase of what I wanted to do was add a moss pole and then let it start climbing. But now that we're moving, I'm not going to be able to jump into the second phase. This leaf right here is turning yellow, but it's also the oldest leaf on the stem. So I'm just gonna pluck that off. Doesn't hurt the plant. Your plant isn't dying. You're perfectly fine. I think whoever gets this, I'm going to recommend getting a moss pole, or I might just add the moss pole in anyways and say, here you go. It'll climb. Next, and this one, we have a lot to say about this one. Just kidding, it's not a lot. A lot of people refer to this, and I have to dust the leaves, so please don't judge that they're not super shiny right now, and the cat bit some of it. A lot of people call this the mini Monstera, which it actually looks like a mini Monstera. Its scientific name, and I might be mispronouncing it, but it is the Repotting tetrasperma, which is a gross sounding name, but that's what it's called, not specifically a Monstera. I care for mine the exact same way I care for my other Monsteras. But that's just something to keep in the back of your head, that it's technically the Repotting tetrasperma. There isn't even the word Monstera in its name. The other thing is that some people will call this the split leaf philodendron, and that is a huge pet peeve of mine because it is not a philodendron. Again, philodendrons and Monsteras are they're both aroids, but they're not the same plant at all. This is a Monstera, not a philodendron. Some people will also call it a Swiss cheese plant, or then they'll call this a Swiss cheese plant. They'll call that a Swiss cheese plant. That's another pet peeve of mine, is when people just call all Monstera Swiss cheese plants. It's cute, and I've definitely been guilty of it before, but I try not to reference them as Swiss cheese plants. Let's talk lighting, soil, water, fertilizer, and all that jazz. Let's start with soil. The first thing is that I have mine in a chunky mix. The goal of creating a soil mix for your plants is to try and imitate the type of environment that they would be found in naturally. So you can see that right in there is super chunky, and your plants will love it. So Monsteras are gonna like the chunky mix because Monsteras are naturally like in the jungle. It's really like highly nutritious, like really chunky underbrush roots. And then they get moss poles because in the wild they will naturally climb up the side of a tree, or yeah, I almost said or a wall, but walls wouldn't be found in the wild. But you get what I'm saying. They naturally attach themselves and will climb up. Many of you know that I prefer moss poles over wooden plant stakes just because it's so much faster for the roots to get attached. Also in the soil, and we'll talk more about this later, I have slow release fertilizer pellets mixed into the soil. I recommend fertilizer to be used in the form of slow release balls. It's just low maintenance. You measure out the right amount for the size of your planter, put them in there, and then you don't have to worry about it again for 6 more months. Slow release fertilizer balls, in my opinion, are the easiest way to fertilize your plants without having to like stress about, has it been 2 weeks? Did I measure out enough right? You know, just measure it out enough at the very beginning, and then set an Alexa reminder for like, I was trying to make sure it didn't go off. Set the reminder for like 6 months, or like put it on your Google Calendar. So we talked about soil, we talked about fertilizer, and we talked about moss poles. So when it comes to lighting, bright indirect light is going to be best always. I have these 3 sitting in the same window, and it's a southwest facing window. The Monstera Adansonii I have in an east facing window, so it gets morning sun. It does receive a little bit of direct sun, but for the most part, it's relatively bright, like super bright indirect. These 3 do receive some direct sun once the sun shifts into the west facing half of the window, but for the majority of the day, it receives very bright indirect light. In the summer months, I do move the Thai constellation outside just because I find with the added humidity here in Okinawa, it just helps this slow growing plant produce leaves a little bit faster. We have not had a new leaf on this one since the summer, so I'm really hoping we get one soon. The Monstera deliciosa can handle a little bit more direct sun, although if there's too much extended direct sun, you still can sunburn your leaves. I have absolutely sunburnt a Monstera before. It was one that I received for free on Facebook, and I already had this one inside, so I kind of wanted to add a Monstera outside and see if, you know, scientifically see if it would get bigger because of the humidity. It was out there for a day, and it was August in Okinawa. I didn't think to ask the owner if it was previously inside or outside and what sort of lighting it had, but basically I shocked the plant. I don't think it was used to having any direct sun at all. I came out the next day and like one of the leaves was black, like the other leaf was like wrinkly and really struggling. So let's just say that one went into the trash can, and I learned my lesson. Luckily it was free. If you are trying to transition it outdoors, just really monitor it to make sure that you're not burning your leaves. If the plant doesn't die from burnt leaves can still stunt growth. You just don't want to do it. When you water, you're going to want to make sure that the soil is about 75% dry, maybe a little bit more. You do not want to overwater your Monstera plant, just like you don't want to overwater any plant. I use a moisture meter at different locations and different depths to get a general reading of what the moisture level is within the soil. If you do have a moss pole, or even if you have a wooden stake, you're going to water it when it's completely dry. And what you're about to hear is how it sounds when it's dry. Very crunchy, that is super dry moss. I would not water the moss pole if the soil is not ready to be watered. I know that a lot of gardeners do. Just as a recovering overwater, I mean, I have fully recovered from being an overwater, but as a previous overwater, I just wouldn't do anything that could potentially overwater my plants. But for me, I do let the moss pole stay a little bit drier than it should for a little bit longer than it should until I know that the soil is 100% ready to go. If you're interested, I do know some gardeners, when they want to water the moss pole but the soil isn't ready, they'll just take a bottle of water and water it and watch it come down until it hits the very bottom and then stop pouring. And then that way, if a little bit gets in, it's not the end of the world. Again, I don't do that, but I've seen other gardeners do it. They've had success, and I wouldn't be opposed to doing it in the future, which is why I'm sharing with you now that if you want to, you can. The last thing we have to talk about before we go outside and repot is aerial roots. Aerial roots are the roots that come out from the plant way up here. Some gardeners will cut those off. Some gardeners will tuck it back into the soil. Some gardeners will put it into the moss pole to help with climbing support. I have done all of those. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, but this aerial root down here and this one over here, I have tucked into the soil. Most of these are tucked into the moss pole. I've clipped some off before when they just looked really ugly, which I know sounds really rude to the plant, but you know, if it's not matching the aesthetic, cut them off. You know that audio? If they're bringing too much drama into your life, cut them off. You know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna stop talking. The one thing that you should not do, I wonder if I should do like a slow zoom effect on my face. I don't even know if the app I use has that. Anyways, the one thing you absolutely should not do is put your aerial root in a shot glass. But why not? I've seen it all over Instagram. I've seen it all over Facebook. I've seen it on TikTok. Don't do it. What's gonna happen when you put your aerial root in a shot glass is that root is going to turn to mush. It's going to end up rotting. It's just you're not gonna be happy with the outcome. Yeah, so just don't do it. I did it once when I was experimenting and then it turned to mush, the whole thing rotted. It was not good. Don't do it. We're gonna transition into outside to repot. We have date night tonight, so I did my hair and my makeup, but I'm probably about to just get sweaty repotting this guy. So that'll be a fun time. I'll just have to redo my hair. I'll see you out there. Repot the deliciosa. I'll show you what I have. I'm actually not going to dispose of all of the soil in here because the soil is still good. It's just the fact that the roots are coming out the bottom and there hasn't been any new growth in a while. Reuse some of it in the new mix. And I mixed inside, so there's like dirt all over me, but this is what I mixed inside, and then I have some cocoa husk chips here, which I'm going to mix in as we go. In order to not waste the soil, while also being controlled and getting it back in the planter, I'm going to be dumping it out in this bag. And then I am sweating because Okinawa is 1,000,000 degrees and it's only March. But I'm going to be using a planter that is about 1.5 inches larger and deeper than the one it's currently in. I got this from Make Man. I think it was a little over 20 bucks, or a little under 30, somewhere in that range. The most important thing to note when you're repotting is that you should never go more than 2 inches larger than the current planter it's in. Anything larger is just going to lead to root rot. A bigger planter does not equal more or faster growth. It's actually likely going to kill your plant faster. So let's get started. One more thing Let's talk about bugs, like plant pests. Just because a plant has been inside its whole life doesn't mean it's never had pests. And just because a plant has been outside doesn't mean that it definitely has had pests. I've had plants out here that have never had pests, but I've had plants inside that have definitely had like 1 or 2 rounds of pests, but it's okay, we treat it and then we move on. She's my assistant. I will double check what the humidity is, but I would not be surprised if the humidity is up at like 90%. It's not even that hot out, but oh my gosh, I am sweating like crazy. You live in Okinawa, you know. If you don't, add it to your bucket list. It's warm, it's toasty. That is such a nice looking root ball. I'm not going to pick her up because I know that if I do, now the root ball is like nice and confined, but I just know with my luck that if I pick her up, she's gonna have dirt everywhere. So we're just gonna shake her off gently, and then I'll show you what the root ball looks like before we plant it again. You never want to disrupt the root ball so much that you're gonna stress out the root system, but you do want to loosen it up a little bit so that way the roots can reach out to the new soil and the new nutrients. Now I'm just going to start filling the planter. This is the mix I made inside. It is most comparable to the Jima Garden standard mix. I'm going to be mixing in cocoa husk as it goes. I'm not going to be doing sphagnum moss for this one. You very much could, and if I was doing this for a client, I would put in sphagnum moss, but for this plant in my personal collection, I just don't really feel like it right now, so I'm not going to. I'm going to start by putting a thin layer of cocoa husk along the bottom of the planter. And then I'm going to take a couple of scoops of this and mix it all into the cocoa husk. I do use systemic granules. Sorry for the cat interruption. Systemic granules help prevent pests or fight against pests for up to 8 weeks. I also have Plant Bar Co. Fungus gnat defense. It's a powder that you sprinkle in. It just helps fight against fungus gnats. I have both of those in here, as well as these slow release fertilizer balls that I talked about earlier in the video. I am going to place in some of the old soil just to help fill it out, and then I'm going to place the root system in. After the root system is in, I'm going to fill up the rest of the plant with the mix that I made inside. The gardening Velcro just snapped off, so we're going to reattach gardening Velcro later on. As you can see, I did not use a ton of the old soil. I just used a little bit supplementally. If your plant has pests, or if the soil is super condensed, it was a like really unhealthy mix in the first place, like if it's very clay based, you're not going to want to reuse it. For me, I know exactly what these ingredients were. This is one of my older mixes. The plant doesn't have pests, and so I was more than happy to reuse some of this. But again, check your soil, use your best judgment. On the whole, I do not recommend reusing soil. This was just for me, for this specific case scenario. I did use a little bit just to fill out the lower half of the planter. If you have questions about like how to make the best judgment in that scenario, message me, let me know. I'd be more than happy to talk to you one-on-one about it. Alrighty, so we have our Monstera in the new chunky mix and a size up. I have to adjust I have to reapply gardening Velcro. But the very first thing you want to do after watering a plant, I just gave it away, after repotting a plant is to water it. I'm not going to water it out here. I'm going to take it inside and water it, and then once it's drained, I'm going to put it back in its spot. This is the update on the hydroponic system. This is 2 weeks after the fact. This is where our sweet basil is in terms of growth. Sub-zero from oregano, and then sage. The one thing I'm not really liking about this, and I don't think I did anything wrong because I followed the instructions, but the little pods are getting a little bit of mold in them. The sweet basil did get that way for, I think, 2 days after the fact. And then as soon as they started growing, it went away. Like I do not see it anymore on the basil, but it's there on the sage. This one is starting to go away, but it's still there than those. At first I thought maybe it was like baby root systems because of the way it looks right there. See that? It's like right where a seed is. So maybe it's baby root systems, but in all honesty, I'm not sure what it is. I'm very pleasantly surprised at how fast they start growing. Like in 2 weeks, I was fully expecting it to not even look like this. So that's super exciting. And I have not had to add any more water to the machine. Yeah, I'll keep you guys updated. I cannot talk, but I'll keep you guys updated every video on how this is going. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. New videos every other Friday. In addition to YouTube, I'm also active on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and we have a monthly newsletter called the Gima Journal. It's a completely free resource that comes out the first Friday of every month. And if you're interested for more in-depth plant tips, little articles, and like client highlights, plants of the month, it is a really cute, if I say so myself, online newsletter, and you will not regret signing up. The link to subscribe is down below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.